All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker. And our first speaker today is Jennifer Cravens. And Jennifer believes, Jennifer Cravens, a CPA, is a dynamic educator, coach, and consultant focused on bridging the gap between the professional world, the world of humans, and the organizations that actually live in it. Her 25 years of leadership experience span public accounting, healthcare, banking, higher education. Her clients range from individuals, organizations, students, and seasoned executives. Jenny believes that while strong technical skills are critical to anyone in the accounting profession, they are not the only source of your superpower. She also believes far too few CPAs and organizations understand that power source. She uses her unique skill set to bridge perspectives, reduce risk and blind spots, establish critical infrastructures, and inspire current and future leaders to be ready for both the challenges of today and the unknowns of tomorrow. During this presentation, she will uncover the key elements of successful self-advocacy, how they apply to your personal and professional lives, and how they are skills women and people in diversity have historically been trained not to cultivate. So please welcome Lauren to the stage.
So I was doing great until I heard my bio. Now I'm nervous. So let me advance these slides. All right, self-advocacy. I love this topic. Partially because I've spent many, many years trying to learn how to be good at it. And it's also something that I know every single one of you already have experience being successful at. You know why? Because you're here today. How many of you could, or maybe even should, be doing something else right now? Something that you had to walk away from, that you did, so that you could be here investing in yourself right now. That's self-advocacy. So I'm done. No, just kidding. The importance of self-advocacy, I hope I don't stumble over that word because I'm going to say it about 20 times, can't be underestimated or overestimated. Can't be overestimated. Self-advocacy can be, I have to point it, can be the difference between a good career and a great one. It can also be the difference between not a great career and a good career. So how are women doing on that? How do you define a good career? A good career might be defined by pay. You know, how much money you bring in. How are we doing, women? Even in situations in which we have the same qualifications and are doing the same job, we are still not being paid as much as men. But maybe a good career is not just all about financial gain. Maybe a good career is about how you feel about yourself. Maybe a good career is about your confidence and how what that makes you feel like. We're not doing so well on that either. Our confidence lags behind men too. Same job, same place, same professional environment. And what does that result in? That results in us not advocating for ourselves nearly as much as men. Men will apply to a job when they meet only 60% of the criteria, whereas we wait to check every single box before we submit our application. Submitting an application is the first step in advocating for a great career. And women, we're lagging. We're lagging so much that by the time we look at the pinnacles of power in our world and in our nation, we don't even hit the double digits. We're really struggling with self-advocacy. But self-advocacy is not just about careers and professional lives. Self-advocacy can also be the difference between a healthy life and an unhealthy one. Studies have shown that in organizations and companies that have high incidence of worker injury, So basically, unsafe workplaces. It's not that the workers and the managers and even the leadership haven't been given adequate training. They all have adequate training. And it's also not that they don't understand what they need to do, because they understand what causes safety risks and they understand what needs to be done in situations. It's that the workers, for whatever reason, aren't self-advocating. They aren't saying, hey, this is unsafe. Can we back up? Can we do this a different way? Self-advocacy is lacking. But it's not just obvious physical injuries that create an unsafe work environment. Sometimes it can be more subtle than that. And that's sort of where my journey with self-advocacy began. Has anyone heard of Washington Mutual? Washington Mutual was a company that I loved and that I worked for. And to this day, it was where my career took off. I love that place. And in 2005, that company was flying high. We had 40,000 employees. We were in every state in the nation. We had hundreds of thousands of shareholders, all who believed in us. We even had a cheer for Washington Mutual that I said more often than I would want to admit. It was a great company. But mountains, piles of data were coming in, telling us that the very products and services that we were offering were putting us at risk. We're putting our company at risk. And it started to get really stressful. I started to lose sleep. I started to lose sleep more often than not. Weeks would go by, and I was getting more tired and more stressed out. I didn't know what was going on. Has anyone ever heard of gaslighting? We all love that term these days. Well, I would sit in meeting after meeting in which we would look at this data and we would all agree, oh yeah, it's gonna happen. But for whatever reason, we were all being gaslit. It's not gonna happen to us. We know what we're doing. You're just looking at it wrong. Calm down. Don't be so dramatic. Chill. I tried to chill. I tried to calm down. I tried not to be dramatic. I tried all kinds of things. I read leadership book after leadership book, trying to figure out how I was going to figure this thing out, until finally I had to take a medical leave of absence. I was so stressed out. But my story is not even the end of how self-advocacy can be the difference between a healthy life and an unhealthy one. My favorite story is Sabrina Williams. In 2010, Sabrina Williams suffered a blood clot in her lung, a totally life-threatening situation. Luckily, she got the treatment she needed, she got the medication she needed soon enough that she avoided death. Fast forward to 2017. Sabrina Williams has just given birth to her beautiful baby daughter, Olympia. And she is in the hospital. She is recovering from a C-section. She is on pain medications. But Sabrina Williams knows what a blood clot in the lung feels like. And despite the haze of medications, she thinks she's getting another one. So she tells the care providers that are coming into her room, I think I have a blood clot in my lung. I need some blood thinners. I need a CT scan. Sweetheart, you're fine. You're just recovering. Care provider after care provider. I need to speak to the doctor in charge. I need to speak to somebody. They come in. She tells them their story. You're fine. You're fine. She finally got a doctor on the phone. And she said, I need a CT scan and I need blood thinner. And the doctor was willing to order those things on her word. And sure enough, she had a blood clot in her lung. She saved her own life because she advocated for herself. She knew what self-advocacy was, and she knew how to do it, which is not what was going on with Jenny Cravens in 2005 at Washington Mutual. And perhaps not going on with a lot of you, because 1/3 of all employees don't even take the vacations they've already earned. I can't think of anything better than not, as an example of not advocating for yourself, than not taking what you've already earned. Oh no, you don't have to give me all my salary, you just keep some of it. And 55% of accountants suffer from stress and burnout, when for all industries combined, that number is only 41%. So we've got a problem. Why? Why is this happening? Why is it happening to women? I blame the princesses. The princesses, actually, they're not at fault. The princesses are culture's representation of the ideal female. And until 2012, the ideal female relied on a taller, stronger, maybe more handsome man to help them extract themselves from difficult situations. Some of them, like Snow White and Cinderella, they flat out were saved. They just laid there running away. Some of them participated in their own salvation, but not without the man by their side. Thank goodness. In 2012, we started getting Meridia and Brave and other princesses who actually could advocate for themselves and could save themselves and accomplish what they wanted to accomplish without the assistance of a bigger, stronger, taller man. Phew. But by that time, a lot of us had already grown and we'd already been raised and we'd already learned life's lessons. So it's hard for us to think like Meridia and Moana. We're kind of more in the Belle, Cinderella, Snow White era, or mindset, not era, but mindset. You see what I just did? Just took a big, deep breath. That is one of the most important acts of self-advocacy you can do. I just did it in front of a lot of people. It went all right. I'm not going to lose my job. So when I found out that I was going to do this talk, yes, I chose to do it. I knew that I needed to do a lot of research to be able to package into a nice, neat little package that fits into 50 minutes about what self-advocacy is. And what I can tell you about what self-advocacy is it's knowing your worth, it's owning your power, and it's designing your career and your life according to those things. But I don't find this definition of self-advocacy very actionable. It is very hard for me to know my worth every single moment of the day, or even define or own my power. I mean, sure, I could do some power poses, and yeah, that does feel better. And yes, I can say affirmations. But I'll tell you, a lot of times when I need to be skilled at self-advocacy, these things are elusive. So I dove deeper, and more than just reading a few books, I started getting into academic literature. And so there's a few things I want to tell you before I dive really into exactly what self-advocacy is. One, self-advocacy absolutely can be learned. Belle, Cinderella, and Snow White can learn it if they want to. And so can all of you. It is a process, though. It is not something that you're going to learn in 50 minutes and walk out and go, all right, I got that down. It is a process, and it is ongoing, and it is always. And it is like a muscle. A muscle that if you want to get stronger, you have to use over and over again. And what does that look like if you haven't used that muscle in a while? It looks like soreness. It looks like misery. It looks like uncomfortableness. It looks like pain. And a lot of times, it looks like you don't succeed right away, but you keep doing it. That is the key to being successful at self-advocacy. So, to give you all the rest, I consulted the experts. I read all kinds of leadership books looking for information on self-advocacy. And I didn't find a lot. I found a lot of words that were a lot like self-advocacy or even self-advocacy, and they usually just boiled down to a little anecdote or a blog, a story, or a 10-point bullet point list that was really just about good communication skills or negotiating skills. That's not self-advocacy. Where I actually found useful academic research in self-advocacy was focused on a very select population of people, not business leaders at all. Most of the academic, serious research on self-advocacy is focused on people with disabilities. Children, especially those with disabilities, and their parents and their teachers, and nurses. And if you know anything about healthcare operations, you know why nurses. That's where the serious research has been done on self-advocacy. It has not been done in the business sector. In fact, one book that I had high hopes for, the title totally implied self-advocacy. It was written by a woman. It had a chapter that had the word self-advocacy in it. I got to that chapter, got to the part, it wasn't even the whole chapter, about self-advocacy, and it started with, when do you know it's time for you to stand up? And literally the answer was, your instincts will tell you. Your instincts, my instincts tell me to behave like Cinderella and run, or to freeze like Snow White, or to fight like some of those other princesses. None of those really work out real well. My instincts don't work when I really need self-advocacy. And when I need self-advocacy, it's usually when I am very vulnerable. What is self-advocacy? It is so many things. In fact, yes, self-advocacy can be standing up for yourself and speaking. Self-advocacy can also be remaining completely silent. There's no one set of actions, there's no one set of behavior that is self-advocacy. So if I were to give you a working definition of self-advocacy, this is what it would be. That it is a sustainable, meaning it doesn't undermine itself, it can be repeated over and over and over again, a sustainable process of learning meaning that you are growing and changing as a result of that process, and it combines awareness, knowledge, with targeted action, with behavior that's targeted, and it improves the quality of your life. That is what self-advocacy is, and that is what I'm going to unpack for you in this pyramid. So I have boiled self-advocacy down to a pyramid, and it has 3 levels. The first level is the foundation. I also call it the generator. It is intrapersonal self-advocacy, and it is by far the most important level of self-advocacy. It's where Sabrina Williams had skill and where Jenny Cravens did not. So where did I leave off on that story of Washington Mutual? I was totally stressed out. I thought I was going crazy. Nothing at work was making sense to me anymore. I actually started to have cognitive problems. Like, I started to not be able to do certain multiplication in my head. I was at the end of my rope. So I took a medical leave of absence and I checked myself into a fabulous psychiatric facility. And I was there for 10 days. I got to go home at night, but it was 8 hours a day. And what did I learn there? I got a crash course in self-advocacy. So I paid a lot more money for that than you guys paid for this. So consider yourself lucky. So the foundation is the generator. It is the intrapersonal, and it is what Sabrina Williams knew and what I did not. Self-advocacy at that level is advocating for yourself, by yourself, and this is the key, to yourself. And you cannot be successful at any other level without being successful at that level. If you're struggling at advocacy at any of the higher levels, go back to the foundation because that's where your problem is. The next level is where you introduce your relationship with others. And this is where the vast amount of business literature talks about advocacy. It's about advocating for yourself with and in the presence of others. That's interpersonal advocacy. It's relational. I'm not going to talk that much about that because there is lots of literature out there as to how to do that. The highest level, which you don't even have to go to, you get to choose if you even go up there. That's where you take your self-advocacy and you move to a high-impact situation in which your self-advocacy is also advocacy for others. It could be advocacy for loved ones. It could be advocacy for your department. It could be advocacy for your company, for your community, for your city, for your state, for your nation, for your planet. Those are the 3 levels of advocacy. Advocacy. Whew, I'm going to struggle over that one. So let's talk about that foundation. The mistake I made before I really had no choice but to take a leave of absence was thinking that advocacy was at those other levels. Doing research about how to do a better job, how to stay on top of myself, not focused on the foundation. So I got this crash course, and what I learned is that self-advocacy starts and is ignited. The generator is ignited, the starter switch, with self-awareness. That's where it begins. And self-awareness in 4 specific areas: physical, spiritual and emotional, mental, and environmental. You must have health in these 4 areas in order to succeed at self-advocating in any of the other areas of the pyramid. You've got to start there. So what does that look like? Unfortunately, every one of those 4 topics could probably be its own conference. So I'm not going to be able to dive deep into it, but I am going to give you a little bit more specifics. So physical health starts with 3 things. It really is, just boils down to 3 main things: adequate and proper rest, adequate and proper nutrition, and adequate and proper physical movement. And for each one of you, that's going to be different. Some people, adequate, proper movement is moving every single day on a treadmill. For other people, it's out in the garden. You got to define what that is. Spiritual and emotional, this was a aha for me that I did not realize. I thought that emotional and mental were the same thing. Oh no. Emotional and mental are not the same thing. Emotional and spiritual are connected. Emotional and spiritual health means being connected to yourself, specifically connected to your emotions. Being able to feel them, being able to identify them, being able to know what they are. And it's not enough to just be connected to yourself. You have to be connected to something greater than yourself. I'm not saying it has to be God. I'm not saying it has to be a certain religion. But it has to be something that you believe in that is bigger than you. It could be a cause. It could be a community. Something you identify with that has other living beings involved. That's spiritual and emotional health. Mental health is where you have accurate, reliable, and conscious processing of your brain, which is what really started to go haywire for me in 2005 at WAMU, partially because I was ignoring all these other things. So that is where I'm going to give you some tips. The last one is environmental. You can focus on all three of those things, but frankly, if you don't have access to safety, you are going to struggle to stay healthy in those other areas. And I'm not saying you have to be safe every minute of the day. In fact, a good life is putting yourself out there and risking. But you have to have access to safety and know that you can get to it when you need to. You also need access to beauty or nature, which will help you with the spiritual and emotional as well. And you need access to supportive resources. Now, when it comes to talking about this mental health, I'm very proud of this because I'm going to turn my 50 minutes into a technical CPE topic. Because we're going to talk about the fraud triangle. So the more powerful your brain is, which is kind of what I was suffering from at WAMU, the more of a challenge you are going to have in that mental health area. And it's because of the fraud triangle. No, I'm just using the fraud triangle to demonstrate why. The fraud triangle, research has shown that every fraudster has three things in common. That fraud was committed because three things occurred. The first one was that the fraudster had opportunity. Opportunity to lie, to cheat, to steal. Frankly, every single one of us has opportunity to do that every single day. So it's not opportunity that separates a fraudster from ordinary blokes like us. The next thing is pressure. The fraudster, the criminal, I gotta take a sip here, self-advocacy. The fraudster, the criminal, had some sort of pressure that motivated them, that incented them to commit that fraud. Financial pressure, solve their problems. Well, who doesn't have that? Who doesn't live under pressure in which a little bit more money would certainly help solve some problems? Or a little bit more prestige, or a little bit more power, or it would help us feel better about ourselves. We all live with that pressure. So it's not opportunity, it's not pressure that creates a criminal, separates criminals from ordinary people. It's that third one, it's the rationalization. It's what the criminal did. It's the state of their mind. Their mind came up with a story that rationalized, that justified why their actions were appropriate, were reasonable, and were something they could do and still look themselves in the mirror. And that is what I did to myself at Washington Mutual. I didn't get enough sleep. Let me go back. Oops, wrong way. Whoa, I'm giving you guys a preview. I wasn't getting enough rest. I wasn't getting proper nutrition. My physical activity was in spurts, and then I would get injured because I was being too hard. I was doing too much, and then I'd have to take off. It was all over the place. Spiritual and emotional, well, I was all confused. I thought the existence of emotions was a bad thing and that I needed to suppress them and keep them away, which was sending me in the wrong direction. Mental, my mind was busy rationalizing why everything I was doing to not take care of myself was a good thing for my career. So it is in this powerful mind that we are most vulnerable to not doing what we kind of already knew. I know that quadrant that I showed you is nothing you haven't seen before. We all know that. We all know what we're supposed to do. But watch out for that mind. So this is where I am actually going to give you a technique. Mindfulness. I spent decades hating that word, especially if it came along with meditation. But it's turned out to be kind of important. They were kind of right. And mindfulness, it goes by many, many, many different names. Contemplation, prayer, meditation. I prefer the term mind training. That is what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is training that powerful brain of yours. And I know that every single one of you sitting in here has just as powerful of a brain as I did, or still do, hopefully. Because you did not get this far. You are not CPAs because your mind is weak and idle. So you all are at risk of having a powerful mind that's going to run into the rationalizations, and you're going to have to learn to train it. The key to training your mind is practice, repeated practice. Now, I spent way too long, years and years, thinking that mindfulness and meditation, the only way that it would really work is if I was good at it, and if I did it every single day for, at least a certain period of time. I was wrong. You don't have to do it. In fact, we're going to do it right now. You guys are going to do it right now. So I'd like you all to just bow your heads. And the main reason is so that you're not looking at everybody else and you're creating your own private space. So bow your head, look down at the table or at your lap, and if you want, go ahead and close your eyes, because I do find it easiest to contact mindfulness when my eyes are closed. So now what I want you to do is I want to take both hands and just gently rub the fingertips of one hand against the fingertips and palm of the other hand. Just back and forth. And notice the sensations. Pay very close attention to what your skin feels like when it's touching the other hand. And just while you're doing that, take a nice deep breath. Noticing the sensations that you feel. Now, take your right hand or your left and put it on your stomach. And just breathe. And notice what it feels like when you feel your stomach moving while you're breathing. That is mindfulness. And when you're ready, you can look back up. That's self-advocacy. But times I need self-advocacy the most are usually in meetings when my blood pressure is going up and Cinderella, Snow White, and Belle are telling me to run, fight, or freeze, or flee, or whatever. And if I did all that, it might look like I was nervous. It might be distracting to other people. So there's an even more covert way to access that mindfulness. And I'm doing it right now. Just take your thumb, you touch another finger, and you just move those back and forth. And you pay attention to what it feels like. So I want you guys to do that again. Drop your head again. And move your thumb and your forefinger against their surface. And notice the ridges. Notice the temperature of your skin. And breathe. That is how you train a mind. You can come on up, well, look on up, or keep doing it. The ticket to keeping yourself out of a 10-day psychiatric facility is to do that for about that long, as often as you think of it. That is the key. So I call the foundation the generator. It is the basis upon which all other self-advocacy happens. It fuels the ability to advocate at higher levels. But the foundation needs actual fuel. Like, you got to put something into it. What do you put into the foundation? How do you keep the foundation generating self-advocacy? The answer is self-care. Acts of self-care. For each and every one of us, self-care looks different. For me, if I sit down and make myself a piece of French toast, that is me telling myself that I am the most important person in the world and I have time to sit down and eat some French toast. For me also, self-care is absolutely making sleep a priority. And one of the things I learned at Washington Mutual is I need more than 8 hours of sleep a day. I know they say you only need 6 to 8 hours of sleep. I've read many books about sleep. Sorry. Each one of us has the right amount of sleep and it's different. And you cannot take national averages and live towards that. You have to find out how much sleep you need. And the only way to find that out is to get it. Self-care. Self-care is physical activity, right? Rest, nutrition, physical activity. I had a tendency to turn those behaviors into something that was the opposite of self-care. I turned them into one more thing I had to do. So self-care is not enough. Self-care is the fuel for the generator, but it's not enough. You also need self-compassion, which is a mindset, and it could definitely be a topic of its own as well. Self-compassion is a mindset. Happy to say there is quite a bit of research out there about what self-compassion is and how to achieve it. But it is a mindset that ensures that the behaviors that you're doing in self-care don't turn into the opposite of self-care. So you need those two things in order to keep that generator going. You need a mindset of self-compassion and you need actions of self-care. So a lot of you may be thinking right now, that's a lot of self. Sounds kind of selfish. I got an answer for you. In fact, not only do I have an answer for you, the FAA has an answer for you. And you will hear this answer and you will hear this reminder every single time you get on a plane. before takeoff, you will hear a safety message. It's the message of how to keep not just you safe, but every single other person on that plane safe. It is so important that even if you travel every single day, you will hear that message every single day. And that message is that you must put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. That's the only way to keep a whole plane load of people safe. And it's the only way for you to be successful at self-advocating. You've got to pay attention to the foundation. So now, the relational level. You've got the foundation down, which is a good thing because the only way to be successful at that relational level is to have a solid foundation. But it's not enough. So having a solid foundation is going to get you up to this level. But at this level, you now will have to introduce awareness of others. You need to be aware of the state of others' foundations, of their needs, of their wants, of their desires, of their motivations. You've got to have that awareness in order to be successful at self-advocating for yourself at that level. And you also have to have an awareness of the situation, which a lot of times we conflate those two things, and we think that the situation is caused by the others that are in it. And a lot of times it's not. A lot of times the situation is bigger than all of the people that we're interacting with. That was certainly the case at Washington Mutual, because the relationships that I had at Washington Mutual were fabulous. I had the best boss I've ever had at Washington Mutual. They say you don't leave a company, you leave a boss. Well, if that's the case, I would have gone down with the ship, because I loved my boss, Larry, and Larry did everything he could to support me while I was not advocating for myself. He tried to help me. But the situation was bigger than the both of us. It was bigger than all of us, really. So you have to have an awareness of the whole situation too. And then this is where conscious communication and good communication comes in, which I'm happy to say you're going to be learning more about from other speakers, and supportive networks, which you'll also hear about. So I don't need to go any further into this level. The last level is high impact. And we all know that Sabrina Williams can live in that level. But she doesn't live in that level every single day. And nobody can. The only way to achieve success at the high impact level is to be able to drop down into that foundation and take care of that foundation and make sure it has enough fuel, make sure it has enough lubricant of self-compassion, make sure it has the health that you need to be able to pop up into that high impact level whenever you want, and then pop that back down whenever you need to. That is how you become a high impact advocate for not just yourself, but for whomever you want to be advocating for. Those are the keys. I got 10 minutes left. So, self-advocacy is a learning process. It requires continual self-awareness. It cannot be effective without that foundation. And that is where Sabrina Williams knew more than I did when it mattered. Sabrina Williams knew what health looked like, she knew what health felt like, and she knew she was in a situation that was threatening that health. I did not. At Washington Mutual, I literally had lost touch with what health felt like. I couldn't remember. I couldn't even tell you how long ago I felt healthy. It took me a long time. And let me tell you something. When I checked myself into that psychiatric hospital, they have you meet with the intake psychiatrist. And so he sat me down and he said, tell me your story. And I went, blah, and I started crying, and I told him everything that was going wrong with my life and how my house, we just sold our house because I was too afraid to live in the house because I'm for sure that the mortgages are going to blow up, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I probably made no sense at all. It was like houses, mortgages, jobs, confusion, blah, 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 blah. I don't know how long I talked, but after I was done, the first thing he said to me was, we're getting a lot of people from Washington Mutual these days. And in fact, the reason that I found out about the program literally was because a coworker of mine that had left WAMU, I had called her while I was on medical leave, and she told me, you got to check this program out. I just got out of it, and it was fantastic. I was like, all right. And I'm happy to say we are both highly successful individuals. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's bragging, but she is for sure highly successful in your industry. So taking care of yourself is never a wrong move, ever. So I left the facility and I realized that I was going to be able to be healthy physically, healthy spiritually and emotionally, and healthy mentally if I got myself out of WAMU. It was an environment that was not conducive to my health. It was too confusing. It didn't make sense to me. That company was taking on risk that I didn't understand and then saying the opposite to the regulators. It didn't make sense. So I met with Larry and I said, he knew it was coming. I said, Larry, I got to leave. I didn't want to leave. One of the things that WAMU did, which was really fabulous, is they really set us up with a lot of stock options and restricted stock that vested pretty regularly. So you were always not that far from another ka-ching. And Larry said, oh, I know you do. I know it's the right thing. You're going to be fine. But you're only 2.5 months from another vest. And I was like, I know. I had to work through that at a hospital. I got it. He said, how about we do this? How about for the next 2.5 months, you work part-time from home. And in 2005, that was kind of unusual. And you only have to answer my emails. You'll just do special projects just for me. I mean, it was a little Larry designed severance package for Jenny Cravens. That's a good boss. And so that's what we did. For 2.5 months, I worked from home in my apartment because I really did force my husband to sell our house because I was just so sure that the mortgage crisis was going to happen. So we moved to an apartment a few miles from our home, and I worked in the apartment for 2.5 months, and I only answered Larry's emails. And I left. I left an environment that was going to prevent me from really being able to maintain health in those other 3 areas. 5 minutes. So I have 5 minutes left. Does anyone want to ask any questions? Oh, one last piece of the story. 2 weeks after I left WAMU for good, like I was done answering Larry's emails, he calls me. So Jenny, I just gave notice. A lot of people in finance and in the risk management parts of WAMU left. We are all trained to read data. We are all trained to identify risk. It was a crazy making time. Questions? Does anyone have any questions? Self-advocate. How did I start getting more than 8 hours of sleep? So actually, this is a really great question. I actually had to start only on the weekends. I couldn't do it during the week. So when I started sleeping as much as I wanted to. Oh, so first of all, I did read books about sleep hygiene, and absolutely had to clear my bedroom of any kind of stimulating anything. Absolutely had to cut down on screens at least an hour before. Screens stimulate me. I cannot drink caffeine past noon, or it will. So it took me a long time. But once I figured out how I could get sleep, I started sleeping sometimes 12 to 14 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday. And that helped. And then eventually I found a job that was much more steady than what I was doing at WAMU. And then I could get 7 to 8 hours during the week. And now I'm a faculty member, and it's super easy to get sleep. And it took me years and years to I think I worked through a decades-long sleep deficit. So I was sleeping massively on weekends. We moved to a new place, and my friends who met me just knew me as the person that slept till noon no matter what we were doing. And that just is who I was for a long time. And eventually that calmed down, and now I sleep pretty regularly. Great question.
Question from the web. What was your, quote, moment of realization?
My moment of realization, I'm assuming that's at WAMU. Yeah, actually I did have a moment of realization. I was sitting in a meeting, and there were members from many different departments, and there was a senior executive. Can't remember his name, but he reported to Carrie Killinger. So he was the highest ranking person in that room. So it was a very high ranking room. We waited for 25 minutes for him to arrive. So about 15 of us sat there for 25 minutes to start the meeting. And then when he arrived, we had a discussion, and it was a discussion about marketing some credit cards to one of the acquisitions we had just done. And I just kept looking at his cufflinks, and they were really fancy cufflinks. And I kept thinking about these products that we were shoving down people's throats, and it didn't make, and I felt like I was going crazy. And then all of a sudden I realized everybody in the room was looking at me, and they had asked an accounting question, and I had not been there. And I flailed my way through whatever it is. I think I had to ask them to repeat the question. And when I got in the elevator, I knew I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing my job. I can't focus. That was my moment where if I didn't do something, the company would probably eventually have. That was the first moment where I wasn't on my game, but it was going to happen more. 1 minute. Okay. If you can ask a 20-second question, I can give you a 40. Anyone else? All right. Well, if I don't go for another 45 seconds, you won't get your CPE. Okay. Well, you guys have been great. I wish you the best of luck on your self-advocacy journey.